Can you lie to somebody and not realize you're lying to them?
I'm not sure I'd call that a lie.
I agree.
You don't know.
But if I don't know it's a lie and I go around and tell other people the same thing, I may be spreading lies and not realizing it. But it's my responsibility to check it out, isn't it?
Well, that's the key right there. We're supposed to be like the Bereans, where God expects us because He's given us His Word, His complete Word, and we see that the early church, before that they didn't have that convenience. They couldn't even read, so even if it was there, they couldn't do much with it. We don't have that excuse. It's a sense of sometimes a little laziness on our parts, but also we put too much trust in man, and we feel because we know that person or they're nice to us, they wouldn't lie to us. We don't know what's in another man's heart, but that's not gonna, it's very clear, that is not gonna hold weight when we have to stand before and answer for ourselves, saying, well, I didn't know it wasn't true. I didn't know it was a lie, so I did it innocently. It's not my fault. That's not consistent with what we read, So, we need to grow up as Christians and realize, we can love a brother or a sister, but if something doesn't sound maybe a little bit right, it is our obligation to find that truth.
The key word, and I appreciate the comment, the key word I got in there that hits me is lazy. We get lazy, lackadaisical. We say, oh, so-and-so went to such and such a school. He's been taught by people who know more than I do. And he's saying this, so it's got to be true. And we don't check it out ourselves. And that's not only true in our spiritual lives, that's true in everyday life too. But God gave us a responsibility to act on to have the ability to do what we need to know, to learn what we need to do. I admit fully that lazy hits me. I don't spend as much time as I need to. And if I hear the same thing 4 or 5 or 6 times, sometimes it starts saying, yeah, I think that might be right. Well, what were some of these guys saying? They were saying that Jesus, some of them were saying Jesus really wasn't divine. I don't know how you can, and that's what John's saying. You couldn't have spent time with him like we did and not know it. And we're telling you. And there's records, even if they were verbal at the time, records of what he did and how he acted and what he believed that you should know. But he keeps re-emphasizing that it's not a new commandment, it's the same commandment. I'm just telling you again. The Department of Redundancy Department, it keeps saying it until it sinks in. How many times do you have to tell your kids, or did my folks have to tell me to do something before it sunk in that was the right thing to do? I think that's another reason why we shouldn't forsake getting together as a family as often as we can, not only so that we can build each other up, but we can learn from each other and learn from what God has to say about how to react. When you're in a situation that you've never been in before, the strength of the brothers and the knowledge of the brothers that have been shared with you over the years can help you through that. To me, that's the Holy Spirit dealing with you, saying, bringing it to remembrance. Let's go back to John, the Gospel of John for a minute. Because he keeps saying, this isn't a new commandment. I'm just telling you the same thing. So let's go back to John when Jesus starts and says, John 13, 34 to 35. A new commandment I give to you, that you love one another just as I have loved you. And also, you also are to love one another. By this, all the people will know you are my disciples, if you love one another. How do we show love for one another? How do we express that? Not only so that they know, but the people outside know. Making myself another note.
You have respectful disagreements about that.
No, I know what you mean. Disagreements that pull you completely apart. That separate you from one another. Her respectful disagreement is, she can say it's white and I can say it's off-white, and we can have a respectful disagreement. But you're right. We shouldn't have disagreements with each other that cause dissension and separation. Do you remember when you're slighted by somebody? Do you carry that around with you?
Well, to be honest with one another, sure. I mean, it's one of those questions like, it answers itself, of course. What do we do with it? Do we hold on to it or do we let it go? That's the hard part,
True love lets it go, doesn't it?
Yeah. Again, Scripture tells us you can't bring yourself before worship, Lord, and you got something against your brother. You got to go work that out. It may not always work out the way you want. The responsibility's on us, even if we feel like we've been slighted. That if we're waiting on the other person to say they're sorry, again, you just don't have scriptural support for that. What you have is you go because you know to do this. So
Right.
that's where again it's Jesus didn't make it difficult for us to understand. We make it difficult.
I think we make it difficult by trying to find ways out of having to do it. I learned from a young age what holding a grudge was. My dad would always say, I may never do anything to him. Somebody done him wrong. But someday, sometime, it'll come up that I will be able to do something to help him. And I'll smile at him and say, no way. That's a grudge. That's holding on. And I talked to him about that before he died. And I said, why do you do that? And he never gave me a good answer. But that's totally 180 degrees away from what Jesus and God are telling us to do. It's not that you're not going to do no harm to somebody. You think, oh, I'm great because I'm not retaliating, but boy, I'm going to withhold something else from them. The holding on to the grudge is what eats at you and tears you up. That's not love for one another. Again, it goes back to a selfish type of thing. I'm going to love you as long as you do something that will benefit me, but if you do something against me, I'm going to come back and bite you. That's not what Jesus wanted. John 15, 12 and 17, he said, this is my commandment, that you love one another as I have loved you. And in 17, he said, these things I command you, that you love one another. Kind of makes you think that this love one another is an important thing, isn't it? It wasn't a suggestion.
Jesus asked the greatest commandment, and that's part of it.
That's it.
I'd say 90% things that we offended by, we're not intended that way. But we give people credit for our interpretation of their actions and their words when we are way off base. If you go and have an open discussion with the person, you find out that their heart was right.
Yeah. Sometimes I read into what other people do, and I think they did that to offend me because, unfortunately, that might be something that I would have done to offend them. You know what I mean? If they do something to me, I think, man, I can't stand. Well, wait a minute, I would have done that in a heartbeat, and that's not the right attitude, is it? The Greeks had more than one word for love, and I wish the English language did. Not all of them, but I know. How's it, the first one is what? Storge? Storge. That's love for family. We all have that. Eros is the sensual love. Phileo is love for friends and your brothers. Agape is the one that seeks the active goodwill for other people. And that's the kind of love that Jesus is trying to stress.
When you try to imagine Christ hanging on the cross and asking God to forgive those that were
Yeah.
crucifying him, that's a challenge. If you take that to your heart and meditate it on a while, you'll figure out you need to forgive everybody. Everybody. I saw a billboard recently traveling that said, authentic Christians pray for their enemies.
It's true. And it's hard. It's difficult. The last thing I want, the human part of me wants, is something good for somebody who's done something bad to me. And like Jim was saying, hanging on the cross, what worse can be done to somebody than to beat them and hang them on a cross, and Jesus can say, forgive them. So who am I when a guy cuts me off in traffic and I get mad and I want to go up and run him off the road? Who am I to be offended by that? That did nothing to me. But it's hard when somebody stabs you in the back, does something to sabotage you at work or at home, undermines what you're trying to do, to have good feelings toward them. How can we actively try to do that? It's a learning process, and I'm still learning it.
Well, you said something, a few minutes ago that the key to that is getting together as often as we can helps keep one another not only encouraged but in check. We're surrounding ourselves with other fellow Christians that have the same desire and pursuit to make understanding the Word of God a priority in their life. It's a bit easier, to handle, these things than it is trying to carry that burden all alone and think you have all the answers and you can understand everything yourself when you study. When you only have your own perspective a lot of times. And
Right.
we need that pick me up. And you also think about the experiences that each one of us have had that may not even make sense to why did we go through something that really hit us so hard. That might be preparing you to counsel another fellow Christian going through that very same thing down the road in which you can help them get through it. So it's not just you're coming to take, you're coming to give at
Right.
the same time. And that's a huge blessing if we take advantage of it.
It's a shared strength, isn't it? And I've had situations where something happened to me, and several years later, I've had the opportunity to look back on that and go and help somebody through it. Because Sometimes when you go through things, you think nobody understands what's happening to me. Right? I'm in this all by myself. Nobody's ever done this before. Nobody can tell me how to react. Nobody can tell me what's coming. And then somebody shows up on your doorstep and says, I've been there, let's talk. When that happens to you, you're more apt to go out and help somebody else with the same thing or a situation similar. That's that shared strength. That's that agape love that we're supposed to have for each other. Now, at the same time, I maybe have gone through something, and I know you, and you're going through it, and I go help you. But what about the person that I don't really know and don't really like that's going through the same thing? Am I quick to go and help them too?
I read this week. Jesus let Thomas touch his scars. Thomas knew Jesus, but Thomas didn't know the resurrection power of God. Don't hide your scars. God wants to use your scars to assure somebody who believes their life is over that he is still that God is still in the resurrection business. And they overcame him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony.
How can I paraphrase that so people that couldn't hear it heard it? Jesus let Thomas touch his scars. We shouldn't be afraid to show our scars to people. The scars that we have reflect the vulnerabilities that we've had over the years. And there's nothing new under the sun. Everybody goes through the same thing. So we need to see if people that are going through the same thing need help. And if they're like me, you'll say, are you okay? And they'll say, yes. Yeah, I'm fine. But you can tell they're not because you've been there. So we need to reach out to those around us that have gone through similar things. What are the effects of not living the command to love one another as God's loved us? What is the effect of that? What does that do to us and to those that outside that are looking at us? If we don't love, what's the effect of that, of not doing that? They throw that word hypocrisy around a lot, don't they? But for things that aren't really hypocritical. But you're right. If we're saying that we're to love everybody as God loved us, God didn't sit there and say, oh, he's good. I'm going to love him. Greg over here, he's got problems. I'm going to put him on the back burner. So why do I do that to some other people? What effect that has is people look out and it destroys sometimes our witness to what God has done for us. It waters it down. It makes it not as valuable as what it is. And people look at us and say, well, you say you believe that, but you sure don't live it. Again, the lady that told me, you might be the only Bible somebody reads, is true. People don't realize what you know if you don't show what you know in the way you live. According to John, the effects of not keeping that commandment is we're living in darkness. We may say we have the light, but we don't. We're living in darkness. And he keeps this darkness and light going because there's no bigger contrast than light and dark, I don't think.
If they know we're Christians by our love and we don't have that love, then what does that say about us?
If they'll know we're Christians by our love and we don't show love, what does that say about us? That we're doing lip service to what we say we believe. like we think it's a country club that we've joined, and we're just checking a box off of a checklist to say, we did this, now when I get to heaven, I'm going to hand this list over. And it's going to have all these checks on it. And there's some checks on this bad one here too, but we won't worry about that because these outweigh it, right? What are the effects of showing that love?
Multiplies.
It multiplies, doesn't it?
What's the old song? Love is something when you give it away. Love is like a lucky penny. Give it away and you'll have plenty.
She said, love is like a lucky penny, give it away and you'll have plenty.
Everybody sing it together.
You don't want me to sing. Believe me, you don't want me to sing. Yes, sir. Yeah.
You talked about darkness, and made me think about what life was like just before Jesus was born. There were soldiers in the street, the conquering army, they had unfair taxes, and the religious leaders were not interested at all in the people who were hurting. They were interested in prestige and power. And then came Jesus. You talk about life, and everyday life is bad as what it would be in the worst gang area that you could think of around here.
Right.
Everyday life is just bad. And then Jesus came and he lived a moral life with grace and love. That was a big difference.
Kind of showed the contrast to what the religious leaders of the day were doing, didn't it?
I think it could be a big difference today if we do the same thing. To go into the world and do the same thing, not just among our own brothers.
Yeah, and Jesus was, I know he was divine, but he was one person. And if one person's light can cause that kind of a change, what might that light that God has put in me do to those around us today? Because there is a lot of darkness around us today. A lot. And if we're in the light, there's no cause for us stumbling. But to be in the light, we have to keep from stumbling, we have to stay in the light, don't we? Like I think I said, there was a guy got in an elevator and said, once Jesus is in your heart, you can't get rid of him. He's there forever. And while part of me says that's true, the other part of me says, I can kick him out. And I have to struggle sometimes not to kick him out. I get distracted. I get busy. And it's easy to forget the things that are important when you're worried about things that are pressing right now. How can we better exemplify God's love for us and our love for God than to reaching out to our fellow man? And part of that is we don't want to cause them to stumble. So if we're not telling the truth, and he's pointing at some of the people who are going around saying, well, we were with these guys, we know everything, and they're telling them a different story. How much is on me if I do that same thing to those around me? It's easy sometimes to fall into old habits before we were Christians. It's sometimes difficult to keep on that straight road, to avoid going into it. So we say that fellowship is important for us to gather strength from each other and for us to reflect God's love back out to the people. What are some of the dangers to fellowship? Well, if you look at 1 John 2, 15 to 17, I think we get some of the answers to that. Do not love the world or the things of the world. If anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. That's a tough one, isn't it? What does he mean by the world? Does he mean just the things around us? We can't love nature. We can't love. What's he talking about? Don't love the world.
It says in 16,
Let's go, yeah.
the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes,
It's-
the pride of life.
Things look good to us, don't they? The lust of the flesh, the desires of the flesh, are appetites that originate from our sinful desires. We see something, we want something, we make it our mission to get something. We get it, and then we're proud of it. Yeah. Look what I did. Well, yeah, look what you did. The desires of the eyes. Have you ever done anything that you didn't see first and think that looked like fun? Or that looked like something I would enjoy? Sin isn't sin because, I mean, if sin came with the neon light flashing and said, this is bad for you, we wouldn't do it. But it comes flashing with a thing that says, this is something that you're going to enjoy. And a lot of terms that I hear now lately is, God made me, he wants me to be happy, so I'm going to do what I want to do because he gave me that desire. That's not true. He wants us to be joyful. I don't know that he ever says he wants us to be happy and to pursue everything under the sun. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Solomon wrote a whole book about that.
Yeah.
This is what, the benefit that God has given us, that, what does that mean, there's nothing new under the sun? Well, if you understand what Solomon was blessed with by God, to be the wisest of anyone before or anyone after, outside of Christ himself, of course, and then give him the means, we see in Ecclesiastes, there was, as I said, I denied myself nothing, he pursued all these
Yeah.
desires that he had.
But what was it worth, right?
Nothing. I mean, and that's why I've always appreciated at the end of Ecclesiastes when Solomon has had a chance to kind of step back and look at everything, and he said it's all fruitless. It's all, it's unfulfilling, and he boils it down to something that is something we can all grasp. That the whole purpose of man, the whole purpose is to keep God's commandments. I'm paraphrasing a little bit.
No, that's,
But it's so these pursuits, and that's why hopefully as we get older ourselves, we look back upon our life and think, gosh, that was so important in my 20s, that was so important in my 30s, and so on and so on, But if you sit and you talk to someone that has some birthdays underneath them,
thanks for saying it like that.
yeah, I'm thinking of someone else. You see this peace that hopefully you see that peace because God has gotten them through all of that, and even when our heart and our mind we think is in the right place, I'm doing these things so that I can provide for my family. I'm doing these things so I can. We don't even see the dangers.
No.
And that's why again, if we don't use these resources of other brothers and sisters, again, Scripture also tells us older men should be teaching the younger men, older women should be teaching the younger women.
Yeah, and I can remember when Gina and I were first married, we lived in an apartment in Newburgh. And we went to Washington Avenue Church of Christ in Evansville. And there was a guy there that, as a 23-year-old, I thought was old. But he was probably 40. I vaguely remember 40. But he sat there and said, what are you doing Thursday night? And I said, I don't know why. He said, we're going to go out visiting. And the visits with the people was purely secondary to what he and I got from each other, mostly what I got from him. But that was the example to me of the older man teaching the younger man stuff. I would have never gone visited anybody. And I remember the first time there was a Wednesday night class, and a guy said, I'm not going to be there Wednesday. I want you to teach that for me. The very first time I stood up in front of anybody. And I was scared to death. Still am, but I think I hide it better. But if he hadn't done that, I never would have stepped out to do it. And part of us training the younger men and the younger women is to challenge them to do better than what they think they can do. Go back to coaches in sports, because I've had kids and grandkids in sports. And the best coaches were the ones that pushed them. Didn't let them sit there and say, okay, you're good at this, we're just going to do that. They pushed them. And the best mentors in the church push us. And again, like you said, that's where the fellowship comes in. We can't push each other to love and good works if we don't know each other and their weaknesses. Part of what makes a good partnership is somebody is good at one thing and the other partner is good at something else, but together they are amazing because you've built on your strengths and weaknesses. And I think that's, as a church, that's what we're supposed to do. Part of loving one another is helping each other to get over their weaknesses and have them help us get over our weaknesses so we can be a better, stronger, more light-filled witness for God to the people around us. Now I'm running out of time. And we'll pick up with some of the other. What are some of the issues that surround us today that fall into this desires of the flesh, desires of the eyes, and the pride of life? What pulls at us? Wealth, maybe. Fame, surely.
Everything you see in a newspaper, on television, on your phone, I'd say 90% of it's trying to lure you into something that you shouldn't be involved with and shouldn't even look at.
Remember the TV show Mad Men? The whole premise of the show was they're going to sell you something you don't need by making you think you had to have it. Right? Isn't that what Satan does to us? He tries to sell us something we don't need, but he makes it look good, like something we really want to desire.
My wife's grandfather would say, we didn't know we were poor until the TV told us we were.
Isn't that the truth? But so much of that show is like the world out there today. People will try to convince you that black is white if they can get you to buy into the fact that you need white. I was going through yesterday afternoon, I had some time, and on one of the streaming things, I think it was Hulu, I don't remember, they had the old Mad Men on, and I watched the first episode or two, and I thought, man, there's more truth in there than what people want to know. They were going to sell cigarettes to people, but the reports were out that cigarettes are bad for you. So they had to convince you that it wasn't. And Satan does that so often. This is bad for you, and I know it's bad for you, but I'm going to do such a good sell job that you're going to desire it anyway. And one of the comments was, yeah, we know cigarettes are going to kill you, but how do you make it? Well, we do this and this and this. Oh, so you use organic stuff to do it, so you don't add anything bad to it? The fact that there's bad stuff in it already, but you don't add any to it, so therefore you're doing a healthier product, so it's good. And people buy that. And it happened to be doing an ad for a cigarette that my grandmother, I grew up watching my grandmother smoke, who died at 62 years of age. How much do we let the lies, the half-truths, the 90% truths sway us from what God wants us to do?
I don't know if we let, I think we don't guard ourselves against.
Okay. Don't guard ourselves against.
Yeah, I think we fool ourselves too many times. And I just was thinking about an exercise years ago that someone suggested, we do for ourselves. And, look at your average week, and try to think how much time you spend on different things. Because if we don't, for me at least, it was startling how much time I spent watching TV. And if you compare that to how much time did you spend on the Word, fellowshipping,
Yeah.
it's quite a humbling exercise.
You prioritize what's important to you, don't you? And if laying around vegging out watching the TV is more important than going out and doing something for somebody, and that's what you're going to do. And that's what people are going to see.
I heard somebody one time in a small group said, look at your checkbook. Is God the God of your checkbook? And that maybe people don't use checkbooks like they used to, but
Same difference, yeah.
you get the idea.
Your money goes where your heart is, doesn't it? Your desires go where your heart is. So the challenge for us, and what John's saying is, remember what you've been taught. Remember what you know. Bring it back to memory. Live it. Don't just stalk it. Don't just talk it. And with that, we'll stop and we'll pick up next week. Thank you very much for your comments. Appreciate it.